Hello, Haska. We are glad to have you here with us, and thank you for being part of the book night of Gajnice Library.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting. It's a pleasure to speak to readers in different countries, and I'm very happy to have Croatian translation of my book. So thanks for having me.
This year, the theme of book night is freedom, and we'll be talking about different aspects of freedom. But first, let's make a small introduction. Your novel, Behind Their Backs, was published in Croatia last year, but readers here still don't know much about you. So could you tell us something about your background? Where were you born? In what kind of family? What did you study?
So I was born and raised in Lviv. It's like city in the very west of Ukraine, close to Polish border. We have very strong this heritage of Austro-Hungary and Polish heritage. So the city is like really like always been seen as very European, not only in the sense of attitude, but also in the sense of architecture, in the sense of spirit. So yeah, I grew up there. I went to school there. I went to university there. I studied classical philology, so Greek and Latin. Yeah, and I have like later I registered a trademark for my art project, which is called Batrachomiomachia, which is you know, my tribute to my classical philology education, which is translated as like Battle of Mice and Frogs. It's like very it's like kind of this satiric piece on the Battle of Mice and Frogs, and which is described in very epic way, but in the end you understand that this is something very small. So I think it's a very good metaphor to modern wealth, to modern social media, so I use it. Then basically I've been living in Lviv till 2017, like really like all the time, but I've been traveling a lot. Back there I ran a bookstore. It's a bookstore for selling books for studying languages. It's like a small company. We ran it together with my sister, and it's actually for the first time during all this like 20 years that is on as a business, that it was stopped for like luckily for 2 weeks. Now we're trying to restart our work, but yeah, even of course even COVID was not that damaging for businesses, for small businesses in Ukraine as war is. So then I started to write when I was not super young, because in 90s and 2000 we had this wave of Ukrainian writers who really started super young. Like there was this phenomenon of Lyubko Dereš, who wrote 3 novels, best-selling novels when he was 17, and other colleagues of mine like Irena Karpa, who is my age, but she started to write 20 years earlier. She started in her early 20s and she became very popular. Me myself, I didn't write anything in my 20s, and then I started to try something in my early 30s, and actually like I did some poetry and some short pieces, short notes, but I never saw it as something that I wanted to turn into a professional thing. I mean, for me it was just more like, you know, this pleasure of writing for the sake of writing. And actually this is like coming back to our topic of freedom. This is something I really, really treasure and I really miss in some sense, because at this very beginning, when no one considers you to be a writer or a poet, you have this like unlimited freedom of creative expression, which is absolutely precious to me. And then after, you need to find some balance if you want to be more professional as author. So yeah, I had some things like I started to travel a lot in 2008, 2009, and I've been traveling for 2 years. Basically, I took some kind of first sabbatical. I was joking that I'm like ballerina. I retired when I was 28. And then straight from my retirement, I went on maternity leave. So I had this like 4 to 5 years of like being off like regular day-to-day work. So of course, this gives more space for something creative. And then in 2014, when my daughter was almost 1, and then Maidan and war started, and all this like stress and pressure, I was not very proactive there, but still like this this thing that this is happening to your country, and this is something you never thought is going to happen in your lifetime, like real military actions, because now it's also important to understand to everyone worldwide that this war didn't start on 24th of February, that it just like affected all the country on 24th of February. And of course, this background, this trying to cope with this reality, like led to stress, together with like, you know, first year of maternity, probably my immune system was quite low. So I ended up in hospital with meningitis, and it was very sudden and very unexpected. And there I was supposed to spend like 10 days in bed, not having no permission even to stand up, to sit up, and it was isolated room, and actually very cute and a cozy hospital. It was not depressive at all, but it was isolation, so I could only listen to the talks around, and I couldn't see people around, and to entertain myself, and I couldn't read. I was not permitted to read, and I was not permitted to use laptop, to watch movies or anything. So everything I had, I could secretly use my phone, because screens were not really like good for me. So I started to make some notes from this hospital, and it was very absurdist and surrealistic mind flow, because I just heard conversations and I started to invent like people around these conversations. And then I came up with like few very surrealistic pieces that I posted on my Facebook, as I usually did back then, with things I wrote. And somehow, like back then, I think maybe because my brain was inflamed, but at some point I thought like, okay, maybe this could become something like more solid, more like continuous. And my good friend of mine, Mariana Venar, who is a great artist, like she just commented on my post. I really see like drawing it, like it's very visual to me. So I wrote to the publisher of Wydawnictwo Staroho Lewa, with whom I was in friendly relationship back then, because I was involved in like translation projects, in some literature events. I was like in this literature milieu, but I didn't see myself as an author yet. And we talked to them, and they said like, okay, I mean, send it over, we're going to consider publishing it. And like on this wave of like, you know, doing this in this like very easy way, after coming out from hospital, I finished this novel basically in a month. And then I really had this image, this vision that probably like, you know, I'm going to have very strict editors who are going to tell me like, okay, this doesn't make any sense. You should get rid of this passage, like, or you should explain here better. But I'm really grateful to the publisher that they were so understanding. And basically if you would start re-editing this book, it would be something absolutely different. It would be another book. Maybe it would be more like, you know, reader oriented, but in some sense I really treasure it the way it is. And this is also like about this freedom of creativity, because this is like fully like I let myself go absolutely. Yeah, so they published it the way it was written, basically, with like some like, you know, minor editing. And it's called Hunt, Dr. Hunt, and it was published in September 2014. So it was my first novel. And after that, I kind of started to dare to call myself a writer, but still like, you know, very carefully. And but I really wanted to work on something else, on something solid. And then my daughter was like, you know, a toddler, a little kid, and it was clear that it's I'm not this kind of person who can work in general in this flow of daily routine. For me, it's important to detach from everything, to isolate, but I didn't want to do it in the hospital again. So I started to look for writers' residences. And I was lucky to have writers' residence in Graz in summer 2016 for 6 weeks. And that's where I wrote the core of my novel, Za Spanoju, Behind the Back, Iza Leda, yeah, in Croatian.
Iza leđa.
Is a leđa, and yeah, so basically there I wrote the core, and then I edited and re-edited it, and I ended up writing it in Split, also in writers' residence in the Croatian city of Split. It was November, December, so it was a very nice time to go, because you still have like this few hours of sun almost guaranteed every day, which was great. And so I finished writing it December 2017. Then it took 1 year to find a publisher who was ready to work with this text. And then, yeah, in 2019, it was published. And then it reached a certain level of popularity and discussion. And yeah, it's kind of
European Union. prize for literature.
Yeah, I won European Union Prize for Literature, which was like really like great recognition to me, and also the way to become visible abroad. Yeah, without that, I'm not sure if this would be noticed by Croatian publishers or publishers in another country.
Well, I tried to read some excerpts of Hunt, Dr. Hunt, which you have on your Facebook page, but it's really hermetic, especially when it's just one part and you don't know the context. So
Yeah.
I thought, or I saw that it's rated 18 plus. So do you have these recommendations for books also?
Well, there are these recommendations because it's also as I spoke before, this new wave of Ukrainian literature, which basically lasts for the last 30 years since Ukraine became independent. It was really liberal, really experimental, and really free. It was also about this aspect of freedom we are talking about, because, you know, in Soviet times, literature was very censored. Of course, like, sexual things were tabooed, obscenity was tabooed, so you could write only in a proper, correct way. And then like this new writers who emerged like right after fall of USSR, like all these great names like Androchovich, Zabushko, and then a bit younger generation like Karpa, whom I mentioned, Odereš, they all like they write really freely, like they had this freedom of writing. So sexuality was explored, the obscenity was widely used, like and of course it also raised a lot of discussions, because not even in the context of Soviet censorship, like not all the people like who cherished Ukrainian literature from all the times were ready to accept it. They thought like this is spoiling the high art, so to say. So this was present. Therefore, like yeah, usually like these books which contain sexual scenes or like swear words, they mark that they contain this. And my book is not the most extreme in this perspective, but yeah, since these things are present there, it's there is this mark that it's 18 plus, and basically Zaspenoy was not marked this way, but yeah, it basically is as well.
So behind their backs is about young woman Marta and her boyfriend Max, who suddenly joins the army without even trying to find some way out. He just accepts it and go there. So Marta is shocked, and I think she's really lost, because the war was never, or army was never part of their conversation or way of life, or even thinking about that. So could you describe her?
Both Marta and Max, they belong to this generation of young Ukrainians who I call them, I mean, they're not orphans literally, but they grew up in some sense as orphans, because there was this big wave of work migration from Western Ukraine to Italy and to Portugal and to Spain. And there was this phenomenon, it was also called like Skype families, where kids were basically abandoned by their parents at home with grandparents, or if they were teenagers, sometimes even on their own. And of course, like most of these, many of these families didn't survive in the sense of like parents being together. There are some positive cases as well, but like there are many stories, like, you know, when why, and usually it was women. The first wave of people who left, it was women who left to be like babysitters or like care for elderly people. And of course, like this like was generation of young women in their early 30s who never traveled abroad. And who started families early, but they still were like very young and active. And obviously many of them started new families in Italy or in Spain or wherever they've been. And the kids here, the kids back in Ukraine, they usually grew up with their mothers being far away all the time, and just like seeing them as ATMs, like, you know, as cash machines sending money. And that like, yeah, created a lot of social phenomena that been like, yeah, very specific and not very great. Like, you know, for example, these kids usually paid for their education in the sense of bribing, because they didn't see the sense of it, and they got this money from their parents, so they didn't value the money. So yeah, a lot of details like that. So Marta and Max, they both belong to this generation. It just Max's story developed better, so his mother at some point came back, and Marta's mother stayed in Italy, and she has this very like difficult relation with her, this bitter relationship, like some kind of, like, you know, she feels sorry about, she doesn't like her mom for abandoning her. And her father is like this also example of this generation, when men basically who grew up in this Soviet, post-Soviet context, where you got education of engineer, and basically it made your life for another 50 years until you retire, and you live in this small town, you have like minimum wage, but you're okay with that. And then many of men of this generation, they just didn't adopt as well as women did. I don't know if it's like, it's not a gender thing, but this is like a true phenomenon which many people notice. So basically her father degraded, turned into like this like alcoholic who lives in small town close to Polish border, like trying to entertain himself with doing some geeky stuff, but obviously being like falling behind from like with all this development of contemporary technologies. So Marta has this like background of unsafe, insecure childhood, of like this, like, you know, black hole in her childhood where she didn't feel comfortable, safe, cozy, like taken care of. And it takes her to this very, like she becomes the self-made woman. So she really wants to, she really makes it well in her career. She starts to work in IT, which is booming now in Ukraine. And so she makes like good money. She creates herself this comfortable nest. Then she has this boyfriend, Max, who is, they're like, they have cool relationship, but it's obvious that Marta is more proactive. She is the one, like, you know, deciding where are they going to live, how they're going to,
and she notices everything, but I don't feel like she is hedonist, but I don't feel like she's really enjoying all that stuff. Like maybe
I think
she's a bit cold. In the beginning of the novel, I even thought she doesn't love Max very much.
Well, but that's the thing. It's also, this is something I always mention, that this is like the book, this book is more about relationship in some sense than about war. Like war is just the background that really like reinforces everything, sensuality and feelings, because basically it's true that she lives, like she goes with the flow. So she has this boyfriend, they're together for some time, but it's obvious that their relationship already stagnating in all the senses, in the sense how they see their future, in the sense of sexual chemistry. It's obvious that they're already in this phase. And also in the context of Western Ukraine, especially like, you know, 10 years ago, it's very family oriented. So basically with their families around them, they're in this phase when everyone says like, okay, you're together for a few years, now you should get married and have kids. And this is something she doesn't have in her, and she doesn't feel like. And it's true, like in some reviews it was written, and I also feel like that she doesn't love Max anymore. Maybe at the beginning they had fun, they get along well together, but then, like, you know, they kind of developed in bit different directions, and he feels lost. He feels like something is wrong, but he doesn't know what, and doesn't know what to do with that. And she as well, she kind of keeps it going, because I mean nothing is wrong, but like deeply inside she's not into him anymore. That's true from the very beginning.
So would they split up regardless of his joining the army?
I mean, my vision is it's like the way I see my heroes. It's I mean, he could go to the army, he could go to the West also like as a work migrant, or become, I don't know, a priest, like, you know, doing something that is like stimulating end of relationship. Because yeah, it's true that Marta is kind of, if she would like rationalize it, she would probably think like, okay, maybe it's time to break up, but for some reason she doesn't. And then it goes, it stagnates, and then something like, you know, an explosion happens, like this bifurcation point, and there is like no way back. Like, so she understands. I think basically in some sense they would break up anyway, or even if they would get married and have kids, it wouldn't be like a happy marriage. It would be this, like, you know, stagnating relationship. Sometimes also happens, but yeah.
So about Marta's freedom, she really enjoys her personal freedom, and I felt like she's kind of person to live and let live. I think at the moment, at the beginning of the novel, when she's introduced to us, I think she's kind of lost because her childhood wasn't so happy. But we see she's really self-conscious, sharp, smart. She's got good job. She's got good salary. She's got boyfriend. So maybe finally she thinks her life is good and she has it all. But then when Max goes away, maybe she's again losing her footing, and she's just falling apart without even realizing it. Only in the end we see how bad it gets.
Yeah, it's true, because I mean, in general, it's important to understand that she belongs to the generation that kind of explored like new ways of living, like in the sense of freedom, in the sense of like also money that gives you freedom, but like it's also the question how you use it, and do you know how to use it, and do you know how to use it the way that it makes you happy, in the sense of like sexual freedom, in the sense of different formats of family life. So basically this is this generation, like I see them like 10 years a bit younger than me, but still like those who got ending of Soviet Union, then like this decade of 90s, which was absolutely like everyone was lost, and like all the orienteers that you used to have before, they disappeared. And then in early 2000s, people started to rebuild this understanding, like what is great life, what is good life, like should I feel guilty for it, shall I sacrifice something? So all this kind of, moral, so to say, moral orienteers understanding of like what you want to be and how you want to live. This is something that like she didn't have in her. So basically she's building it. And then of course she had this like, picture of like happy life. Okay, I have a great job, I make money, I have boyfriend, we have like cool relationship, we have fun, we go out, we travel, like I mean everything is great, and then but deep inside she doesn't feel happy, and she doesn't understand why. And that leads to this situation, because like a part of Marta, there are these other women, and I put them into this book on purpose, in the sense to show this another scenarios that work for someone and not always work for you, and you don't understand why. There is no explanation to that. But like, for example, this example of Olka, like the girl who is like, she's young mother, she's like great professional, she's successful, her husband go to the war and came back, and they have this beautiful house and a dog, like these people who like create this picture that you really think like, oh my god, how is it possible, how do they make it? And on plus to that, she really feels like she's happy, there's nothing she's complaining about. Like in some episodes later we see that there are also like some secrets behind Olka and behind Katrusa, and some doubts, but still this women feel much more consistent.
Marta finds them repulsive, their patriotic feelings and their supportiveness and caring for the soldiers. She doesn't want to be around them.
Yeah, but it's also this kind of, this is childish reaction in some sense. When you try something and you don't fully like it, it doesn't work for you, I don't know, like whatever, like skiing, biking, chocolate, like something that everyone feels comfortable and great at it, and then you try it and you don't like it. Or like music, everyone excites and it irritates you. Like this like childish reaction is like this irritation, this repulse, like like why do you like it and I don't make it to work for me? Like there must be something. Like, so for Marta is more this like this rejection is this very childish reaction, I would say. Yeah.
So if the novel was written today, would Marta be more patriotic?
Wow, this is super interesting.
Feel the situation better.
Yeah, this is a super interesting aspect, because like since basically like through these years, these characters of my book, I always say they don't have like a real prototype. So it's like made up characters, like collective prototypes, but they really became like, I know them, like, people I know. And the thing is that like now, like with the beginning of war, like it's like the full-scale war on 24th of February, it's true that like when you follow people, there's some people who show like absolutely unexpected reactions. I mean, in different ways, like, you know, many people act and react absolutely not the way you expected them and they themselves expected them to do. Some people who you would think like, you know, would be long time abroad, they're like super actively like volunteering or like fighting. Some guys who like always declare that they're pacifist and they will never touch any weapons, they really also super like act, they really go to the army. Or like some people who usually like, you know, like been giving a lot of this like patriotic speeches, you just don't see them anymore. Or like, for example, for me, like super interesting phenomenon is like bloggers. Like it's really like, it's worth PhD research, because if you take an average, like, you know, big blogger, like especially like those who were into lifestyle, like, you know, makeup, like and like, you know, chill and cappuccino and this kind of stuff and parties, sometimes you don't really recognize their faces, like, you know, the way they act and the way the attitude they have to their content. So coming back to Marta, it's also like absolutely different scenarios were possible with her, and it also really depends on which phase it would happen. Actually, I think is this like, for example, if we take the ending where she's so depressed and so lost, I think actually like full-scale war could bring her back to life in some sense. She would finally see the purpose in all it, because before, like, the main thing was that she didn't see the real purpose of sacrificing her own comfort for the sake of the country. And now, like, it changed so much, and it became so not so black and white and so clear, like who is the enemy, plus people's reactions like got really sharper and stronger. So I think yeah, we could see like very interesting transformations, and we are seeing them like in real people, not necessarily in Marta herself, who exists only in my imagination.
And about freedom in general of women in Ukraine, Marta is referring to female gold diggers, which are reading articles about how to find a rich husband, which is nowadays isn't some shady underground guy, but an IT expert. So what do you think about freedom for women? Do they feel free? Do they feel independent?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, Ukrainian women, like throughout the history, they had this certain level of emancipation on different phases. Like even if we refer to older times and older works, like 19th, 20th century, and Soviet times were very specific in the sense of female emancipation, because in some aspects, like women were more emancipated in Soviet system than, for example, in Western Europe. There were reasons for that. It's just because Soviets really saw everyone as like, you know, a working force and part of the system. But still, like in this like very practical aspect, everyone had to work. There was like good system of kindergartens and daily care. Like it was not the best kindergarten you would want to end up, but still it worked. So and this also brought, like, for example, generation of my parents, like in like early 80s, there was really generation of kind of equal marriages of young people who both worked and who both like developed their careers. I saw a lot of examples like that around me. And but then, like, there was this, like, in some sense, throwback of 90s and beginning of 2000, when all the like economical system basically like fall apart. So all this, like, the only people who had money were all this like shady guys, like who did some blurry business. And obviously, like, you know, different people look for different ways of survival. But then this narrative of, like, you know, as a woman, making yourself, your body, your look as an asset. You invest into this assets, and then you want these investments back, getting yourself a rich husband who takes care of everything. And basically, like, you know, this is this old school patriarchal model, which I'm not, like, you know, like fully against in the sense of like none of women in the world should do it. Like, you know, if there are women who feel comfortable in this setting, I mean, why not? Like, it's their choice. Like, for me, like, this is the core of feminism, that like everyone has her choices. Like, and if you want to be like a full-time mom at home and your husband works, like, why not? And it's true that in Ukraine now, basically, like, I mean, before war and now with war, we see it even stronger, like how proactive women are, like from battlefield to volunteering. So Ukrainian women, they did have this guts of independence. We always even had this joke, like even if the man is head, woman is the neck, like, you know. So and in Ukrainian folklore, there are a lot of these things about women kind of dominating and deciding and carrying her drunk husband on the shoulder back home. Like, so yeah, Ukrainian women were not like oppressed, I mean, that much, but they didn't let themselves being oppressed. But it's also true that this classical model of patriarchy existed and was kind of promoted, like, you know, your biggest success is to get married and become a mother, all the rest you decide after if you want it or not. So and plus, I mean, for example, if we come back to Soviet times, there was this thing that yes, women were emancipated, they went to work, but then all the household stuff traditionally was on their shoulders. So I mean, there were families with more or less balanced approach to it, but still, like, it was seen, like, you know, as the kind of sphere of competence and responsibility of a woman to take care of home and take care of kids. But now it's changing a lot, and I think also like even like this getting out from this paradigm of classical family, like you know, this different experiments of sexualities, LGBT, like now you see like very different women in Ukraine, and they all have their spot.
And what about the freedom of men? I mean, you got the invitation from the army and you have to join, you have to go. So what about the freedom of men?
Yeah, that's an interesting aspect as well. Like basically, and I thought about it a lot, and like, you know, before 24th of February, it was seen one way, and then now it's seen differently. But actually, like, and actually before the full scale war started, there was this thing that also women also have to be, all women also have to be in some conscript, like listed in the army, not like conscripts, but like listed in the army according to their specialities and like professional skills. But it's also interesting thing, I thought about it in some sense in this concept of, like, you know, gender equality. War is the thing that still like brings many things to default. Like it's like men under 60 who cannot leave the country, like unless you have, like, you know, you're father of 3 or have some medical conditions. So yeah, it's true that like this is something very much freedom limiting, and also with heritage like of horribly managed Soviet army where men had to serve like to certain generation, and we had this, like, you know, this almost horror stories, like how terrible it was and how useless this 2 years, like basically wasted 2 years were. Army was always seen as something that takes your freedom away, like for 2 years or for longer. But I think now it really changed. Like, hopefully, I even hope it's temporary, because like now it's the situation of open war, and most of men, I'm like what I observe, like I think like 90%, maybe there is a small percentage that doesn't fall into this 100%, but like most of them, for them, it's not loss of freedom, it's something they would do willingly. I mean, there are laws that limit it, but somehow now it's not seen as obstacle, as limitation from the state anymore somehow. Yeah, it's
And what about Max? I mean, the novel is obviously about women and about Marta. We don't find out much about Max, about his thoughts and feelings, but we don't know why he joined the army. Was it something inner inside himself, or he just didn't think there's other way?
This is something I did actually on purpose, and it's true that like we don't know much about Max, but For me, Max is very clear and recognizable, and for some people, I think it's also connected to this like Western Ukrainian culture, because in Western Ukraine, in Galicia, also coming back to the figures of women, there were always this very, very strong kind of vertical of women in each family. I think it's also was connected to the wars and all the things that like usually like men just didn't survive that long, and women had to be super strong because men either were like at war or they were like involved in some political repressions, political events, and then were repressed. So there was always this core of super strong women, like grandmother, mother hierarchy, and usually boys, like, you know, somehow there is this culture that this boys were very like treated, it was like a lot of care, like they grew up very much like you know, this like golden kids, like, you know, in the sense that like very, very cherished. And of course it didn't make them very decisive and very strong and very as personalities. And they just like usually follow the flow, or sometimes there is this opposite reaction that they want to prove to their families that they're like, you know, the adult men, and they can make their decisions. So I think for Max, it's kind of a mixture of everything. And the thing is that we actually don't know why did he get, because he didn't go volunteering. This is also very important detail. He didn't go to battalion. He was drafted to army, and he was drafted to army on the phase of 2015, 2016, where like a lot of draft letters were sent out, but like many men like avoided going to army. And we just don't know if it was an accident. And for example, like these people from Vojenkomat, from the army authorities, caught him on the staircase bringing the letter, or he just decided to prove finally his mom and his grandma that like he is the big boy and he's going to decide for himself, or he was tired of his job that was connected to this corruption in judicial system in Ukraine, because he was a helper of lawyer, but like he didn't make much with that, but it brought a lot of like engagement in this dark schemes. So all these factors combined, like I think he did see it as some kind of sweet escape. I mean, not sweet escape, but escape. Also like feeling that like with Marta it's kind of okay, but it's not okay. So I think he's kind of passive. Like obviously Marta was much more proactive on what they do and how they live, and also he was, you know, in some sense oppressed and passive, and then he decides to do something proactive. That's how I see it, and it's on purpose that he is so invisible, because basically we don't know like what's in his head. And I thought about it like when I was writing a book, that maybe like, you know, is more, it would maybe be more professional from the point of view of writer, also to write it from Max's side, but I didn't have it in me. I didn't feel strong and enough for it to also write it from his side.
So let's talk about sexual freedom. And Marta is, in terms of that, very free. She enjoys sex. And what I can say about these descriptions is that I thought they were astonishing, and I really enjoyed reading them. And at the same time, I think they are very poetic. And she describes precisely every sensation that goes through her body. So she's always aware of everything. She never loses control. But what about the freedom of writing those parts? Was it difficult to write them? Did you have to break some boundaries in your mind, or is it just as anything else?
No, for me, in the sense of writing, for me, it's actually supernatural, and I think I couldn't do it any other way. And it's also actually the pieces that like flow the easiest. Like, you know, once you start writing it, it just goes. So for me, and it also like, because this question was asked a lot, like, why do you put these sexual scenes? Why are they so open? And for me, it's such a like part that you cannot take out of her personality, of her life. It's like this, like, you know, this flow of things that are happening to her. And it's also true. I really like happy that you noticed it, because Marta actually uses sex as the way to feel herself, to justify her existence, to justify her living, to feel like, you know, kind of in some sense to touch this world, like with this sensation. So for her, it's not that much about interaction between men and women or sexual play or like trying different practices or like, you know, being conscious.
It's completely irrelevant who's on the other side.
Yeah. For her, it's more about like, you know, like somehow like justifying her physical existence. And that's why she analyzes it so much, like, you know, kind of, you know, fixating every sensation, like just like, you know, trying, because for her it's like a material to, material she's built out of, like, to feel alive. And and we see like how strongly it changes in the ending of the book. So for her, it's really a tool. For her, it's really a tool to existence.
So the last question about the freedom, and maybe it is a difficult one to answer these days. And you know, you write about freedom of expressing yourself freely in terms of language use. And about purism in language, you say something like this, so it's my translation, but you know what I'm talking about. Emotional attitudes towards language purism, monolingualism, communication in Ukrainian exclusively, evokes in me only one thing. Let's say a woman had a lover who taught her how to surf or drive a car, but he was still a scumbag, alcoholic, and maybe even beat her. When she finally left him, she liberated shouts, surfing and driving the car are unnecessary shit, same as he was. Instead of that, she should forget about him and look on the skills he taught her as compensation for moral damage he caused. So today, and under the circumstances, it is completely understandable, you ask for a complete boycott of Russian culture. Do you think maybe one day when the war is over and maybe some next generation will be able to see Russia as that bully, so just move on and takes what's good from that?
I'm really grateful that you asked this question, and I'm really glad that you picked this excerpt and read it, because the thing is, it's this metaphor now develops further. So basically what happens, what was like in this passage, okay, you had this bully boyfriend who actually was like, it was kind of, you know, this incestual abusive relationship in some sense. And then, okay, it's over, you get over it, you run away, you live your life. But then the thing is that now this incestual bully abuser comes back, and it actually like just like he not just comes back. He burns your house, kills your relatives. So basically, he makes it like just like turns it all into horror, just because he doesn't want to let you go. So and of course in this circumstances, it brings this like, you know, hatred and repulse to the absolute level. Like the most tolerant people I know, and I myself, like I didn't have anything against Russian language and Russian culture before 24th of February. And I always thought like it's important to like, you know, to see it, to be flexible and to build a dialogue. And many bright people of culture are the same, and like analysts and like researchers and artists. But now it brought it to such an absolute, like, you know, after things that have been happening in Mariupol or Irpin or Kiev, like you just like, it's like, you know, it's no return point. Like it's there is no place for dialogue, there no place for common events. Like it's just like for Ukrainians now, it's absolutely unacceptable and insulting when, for example, Western like organizations, media ask like, okay, let's have this event with this like Russian author or Russian artist. He is not pro-Putin, he is against war. But now you just like, it's just an instinct. You just cannot do it. Like it's just like over. And I've been thinking about it a lot, because I mean, obviously, like in a bright future after Ukraine like wins this war and like keeps its territories, and Russia pays all the reparation, and everything is reconstructed and rebuilt, which we all want to believe in. Like it would be an element to making this world better, because like the more you isolate the bully, the more dangerous he becomes as well. So like, you know, even not from very humanistic point of view, but from very practical point of view, this integration and reintegration and building dialogue and bridges is important. But it's so difficult to say and to predict when it's going to be possible and in which format, because it's also true that like, from like, I mean, what we know about Russians and what we know about Russian propaganda and what we see throughout the history, it's not the nation who is going to accept their collective guilt, and it's not the nation who is going to say sorry, and it's not the nation who is going to include into their history books that this is our biggest mistake we ever made, like, you know, for example, Germans did about Holocaust. I think this is two things that might be compared, but like, you know, all the attempts, for example, like Holodomor was never recognized by Russia and all these other things. And here, like when it's happening, like, and fixated on the screens worldwide, and there's so many evidence of war crimes of different format, it's still like obvious that like, I don't know, 70% of Russians don't see it as their crime and don't see it as a crime of their government. So, so like, just to sum up on this question, of course, the optimistic scenario would be that, I don't know, in one generation, people would be really able to make it up to a certain level. But on the other hand, it's really like hard to believe it's ever possible again, you know. So, yeah.
Thank you. And one more question for the novel, about the novel. Could you explain the title? Because in Croatian, as in Ukrainian, you can tell that it's plural. But from the English translation that I find on your Facebook page, I see that it's behind their backs. So
I think it just... yeah, sorry.
They?
No, I think this is just the specific of English language, because first when I just made a rapid translation myself, it was behind their back, and but the native speaker said that behind their backs sounds way better and way more natural. So it's just the thing was English language. So in general, it has to be, I mean, it meant to be single. So basically, but like in Ukrainian, it has this dual or even triple meaning, because behind the back, you can say, like, if they were like, you know, now we're all hiding behind the backs of Ukrainian soldiers, they're protecting us. So there is this metaphor of being protected behind someone's back, but also there is this metaphor of doing something behind someone's back that he doesn't see. Yeah, so the same in Croatian. So in Ukrainian, it's the same. And I think in English and other languages, it's going to sound different, but this is the, you know, the translation part. Like, no, I mean, it's just like basically this metaphor of women who stayed behind, voluntary or not, and who try to understand what who actually try to understand what do they do behind the backs of their men. First, like, they feel protected, but on the other hand, like, do they like their life? Do they want to do something they wouldn't want to tell their husbands after? Or even like to have thoughts like, you know, I hate you for going to this war. Like, you know, this is not something you're going to say to someone who defends you. So, yeah.
And for this book, there is an interesting video clip on the Vimeo platform. Is it a common practice to advertise book in that way?
No, it's not a common practice, but I was lucky I mean, that was my idea. Basically, there were some books there were some book trailers to produce for some books, and then I happened to have an extra budget for promotion of book from the prize, from European Union Prize of Literature that I won, and then I knew this film director that developed the script of the video and who read my book and really liked it, Marina Stepanska, and that's why I got in touch with her and asked her if she would be interested to make a book trailer. And then we still didn't know what format we want, but then with the budget we had, it looked like animation would be the easiest, and then this visual artist, Anna Lee, who creates all these collages and whose art I loved before. We engaged her, and then Marina also engaged Kate Woznitsa, who is animation artist who made the pictures actually move, and the music composer. So yeah, Tach Jung, and then all that put together, we created this video, which I really love.
Yeah, it's great. It's funny, and
I think it really shows the book.
Yes, describes the book really well. And the last question: are you working on something new?
Well, I have an idea, and actually now in the context of what's happening now of the war, it's reshaping a bit, but I still think it's going to be what I had in mind before. And but yeah, as I said, for me the only way to write is to go to writer's residence, and then I have one in next summer in July. So I hope to start to come up with the draft of a new novel in July. But hopefully, the settings and around and things happening around will be more optimistic and less stressful than now, and it will be possible to.
But now you live in Brussels, right?
Yeah.
Was that?
Yeah, we moved to Brussels. We moved to Brussels in September. Yeah, it was planned before. Like we took a year off in 2021, traveling around, going to Latin America, some kind of sabbatical year, and then we planned to, with my family, we planned to move to try to live somewhere in Western Europe, and we picked Brussels as destination. And yeah, basically we came here in September. Like it's now I say that I'm lucky. I'm lucky one not to have this, not to carry this, this how to say, this fright, this on my shoulders, this that I'm refugee, because I'm not a refugee. I came here voluntarily in September. In October, actually, we brought like 500 kilos of our stuff that was stored in Kiev in the storage for a year. So you know, it's really a different story. You see, I could bring my books, and I ordered more books that were brought here like in January, February. So for us, it was different, but we like feel like, yeah, very like big longing for Ukraine now, and it's different than before, because it's true that like I was never like that much attached, and I always felt very much at home in Western Europe, and I always wanted to live in Western Europe, so I didn't feel any nostalgia and any homesickness when we moved. But when the war started, there was this like strong urge, you know, to be there somehow. Although I'm very like much person that's very much into safety, I don't like risky context and all, but I still like, there was this very strong feeling. And now like the most painful and the most strong feeling, which I now feel and understand what is like in general this concept of nostalgia is about, it's really this longing for the country that in some sense doesn't exist anymore. Like, you know, it's we all believe that Ukraine is going to win this war, and then Ukraine is going to be reconstructed and rebuilt, and there will be this strong renaissance of everything, of business, art, culture, but still it's never going to be the same. And this country that we knew, that we loved, that we felt so happy in, for example, for my daughter, is like huge tragedy, because like unlike Marta's, her childhood in Ukraine was amazing. She was very happy child, and she loved being there. Like the last summer she told us like, okay parents, if you want to go to Asia or to India, go, just stay in summer house with my grandparents. She really has this like, you know, strong attachment, although she's half French, half Ukrainian. But she grew up in Ukraine, and she had, like, as I said, like happy and comfortable childhood there. And Ukraine was like, for last 10 years, it was in some sense place to be. It was like flourishing country with like level of digitalization you don't find in Europe, businesses growing, party life growing. Like Kiev was New Berlin, a destination for nightlife for people from all over the world. Like I was on a bus here a few days ago, and there was the random guy who was like, oh my God, it was my party destination, now they're bombing it. Like, you know, for him, it's just like, he has nothing that connects him to Ukraine, like in his head, but like he just traveled to Kiev for fun from Brussels. So this is something that like brings this like very painful nostalgia, this understanding. that it's going to recover, but it's never going to be the same.
Yes. So, dear Haska, thank you for sharing your time, opinions, and thoughts with us. We hope to see you soon in Croatia, and we are looking forward to your next novels. And
thank you for this talk. It was really nice, and I really like that our bookshelves matched. Like it feels like continuation. Thank you so much. I hope to meet Croatian readers in person soon as well.